When it comes to Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to the Civil War. I made a video earlier this month about how the Civil War was completely non-beneficial to the entirety of the Empire or to the entirety of Tamriel, since they were about to be fighting the Thalmor later on down the line, and they needed the entirety of Skyrim and the entirety of Tamriel to band together in case they had to have a full-out brawl. So today, I want to talk about the Stormcloaks in particular, and I want to talk about why they were in the right when it came to them fighting for their own people and why they fought in the war to begin with, and how the Stormcloaks should be commended for fighting for their own honor, fighting for their own right to practice their religion, and fighting against the Thalmor themselves. So today, let's talk about the obvious. Here we go. So first, we're going to talk about the obvious reason why the Civil War broke out: the worship of Talos. As you knew from my previous video, if you actually watched it, Talos is a god of the Nine Divines, and he was worshipped by the members of Skyrim. He was born in Skyrim, he fought throughout the entirety of his lifetime, ruled the entirety of Tamriel through the Cyrodiilic Empire, which he created after he conquered basically the entirety of the world. And upon Talos' death, and after creating the Cyrodiilic Empire, conquering the entirety of the world, and basically being known as one of the most powerful individuals of all time, and becoming the Dragon Lord of Cyrodiil, he effectively became one of the Nine Divines, and the High Elves didn't really like that, considering that they were the last few individuals that Talos threatened to conquer with a super weapon that he found in the depths of a volcano. This angered the High Elves to such an extreme degree that they have been fighting to basically get Talos knocked off the Nine Divines Charter for well over thousands upon thousands of years, but they never got anywhere because they never had the ability to actually knock him off the Nine Divines. But considering the fact that he became one of the Nine Divines, worshipped by the people of the Cyrodiilic Empire, of which he founded, and that the High Elves were a part of, there was realistically no chance that they were ever going to get him knocked off the Nine Divines roster. Now, the next thing we have to talk about whenever it comes to why the Nords of Skyrim want to fight against the Empire is the Great War itself and what exactly happened before everything went downhill. So, in this story, the Thalmor, who are actually the Aldari Dominion, but I'm just going to call them the Thalmor for my own sake of mind, basically wanted to make their own demands. Whenever Titus Mende II ascended to the throne and inherited a weakened empire, the glory days of the Septums were a distant memory. Valenwood and elsewhere were already taken over by the Thalmor. The Black Marsh had been lost to by Imperial rule since the aftermath of the Oblivion Crisis. Morrowind never fully recovered from the eruption of the Red Mountain, and everything was basically going down shit creek without a paddle. With this weakened empire in mind, on the 30th of Frostfall at about 171 in the Fourth Era, the Aldari Dominion sent an ambassador to the Imperial City with a gift in a covered cart and an ultimatum for the new emperor. A long list of demands, basically including staggering tributes, disbandment of the Blades, outlawing the worship of Talos, ceding large sections of Hammerfell to the Dominion, and they basically made massive demands knowing that the Cyrodiilic Empire wouldn't be able to fight them on their terms. They denied this request, and in return, they uplifted the cart, and the heads of literally hundreds of different Blades members from the Somerset Isles and Valenwood spilled out onto the floor for everybody to witness. They basically murdered every single Blades member throughout the entirety of the Elven-controlled lands, and it was not a pretty sight for anybody, and war erupted. Now, throughout this entire war that lasted for 4 years, the Thalmor were in possession of a Daedric artifact called the Orb of Vermina, which was basically a fancy-ass Palantir that would allow you to see literally everything that was going on throughout the entirety of Tamriel. They used it to look through the entirety of the Imperial lines, find generals, spy on them, find the Emperor, spy on him, and basically overcome the forces of the Imperial Legion or the Cyrodiilic Empire by spying on everyone and everything before the Forgotten Hero in Elder Scrolls Legends took the Orb of Vermina away from the Thalmor, and they were left without a spying device, and they effectively gave up the war. Now, here is where the White-Gold Concordat comes into play. The White-Gold Concordat effectively was very unfavorable to the Empire, and they only won the ability to make this treaty after the Battle of the Red Ring, which absolutely decimated the Aldari Dominion or the Thalmor armies in Cyrodiil and allowed them to take over Cyrodiil once again. And they decided to negotiate a peace treaty so they wouldn't have to be able to fight them again. Now, for those of you who were interested, there were main three terms that the White-Gold Concordat basically awarded the Thalmor. A large portion of the southern Hammerfell would be given to the Dominion, Talos worship would be banned from the Empire, and the Blades would effectively be disbanded, even though they basically killed all the Blades anyway, with the exception of Delphine and whatever his name was. So the Thalmor basically lost their ability to demand gold and got everything else instead. So good for the Thalmor. And this is where we get to Skyrim and the worship of Talos. The worship of Talos was basically a common practice throughout the entirety of Skyrim. Literally everybody worshipped Talos in Skyrim. All the Nords worshipped Talos. He was basically the main god of Skyrim during the time of which the Empire was created, all the way through the White-Gold Concordat, where it was still legal to worship him. And one of these individuals who detested the Empire, who detested the idea of the banning of the worship of Talos, and who fought in the Great War actively against the Aldari Dominion and the Thalmor, was Ulfric Stormcloak. Ulfric Stormcloak fought in the entirety of the Great War against Thalmor, alongside Galmer Stonefist and Legate Ricky, who you find in Solitude as you join the Imperial Legion for the first time. Throughout some parts of the Great War, Ulfric Stormcloak was captured, he was tortured for information, he was interrogated, and there was some little information in a dossier in the Thalmor embassy that says Ulfric was allowed to escape, but there's not really a lot of information aside from that one note. Sometime after the Great War, however, Ulfric Stormcloak marched a crap ton of his men onto the Reach so he could take back the entirety of the Reach from the Bretons, known as the Reachmen. Ulfric was basically told that if he took over the Reach, he would be allowed to worship Talos freely in Markarth again. Ulfric agreed and marched his militia to the gates of Markarth and retook the city, supposedly using the power of the Thu'um. But as soon as the Imperial Legion showed up to reinstate law, Ulfric allegedly refused to give them entry into the city, thinking that he would be able to worship Talos freely, but they told him, no, you can't do that, because if you worship Talos freely in this city, then the Thalmor are going to be mad, and they might show up with an even bigger army to take over and kick all of our asses all over again. Ulfric and his men were then captured, were scapegoated into thinking that this was a small rebellion, were imprisoned, and Ulfric had basically hated the Empire ever since that day, so he basically just detested everybody that associated with the Empire, considering that the worship of Talos was banned and he was imprisoned for taking over Markarth after it was already taken over by the Reachmen. During this entire time, Ulfric becomes the Jarl of Windhelm, and after the death of High King Istold, the Moot convened to elect a new king, and Ulfric continually spoke about Skyrim's independence in terms of just shy of treason. Eventually, the Moot just decided to make Tjorg the High King of Skyrim. And I know I said they were brothers. I'm sorry, I thought they were. That's my bad. This is where the magic happens. This is just directly before the Civil War in Skyrim. Ulfric thinks that the Empire has made Skyrim weak, and the entirety of the Empire is now weakened by the Aldari Dominion and the Thalmor being able to go around killing whoever they want because they worship Talos. Ulfric Stormcloak goes to Solitude, challenges King Tjorg to single combat the old Nord way, uses the Thu'um to knock him off his feet, and then stabs him in the chest with a sword, and everybody thinks that he's a murderer because he used the power of the Thu'um to win this battle and didn't fight fairly. Ulfric Stormcloak ends up successfully not being captured by the Imperial Legion at this time and runs back over to Windhelm so he can declare himself as the new High King because he challenged King Tjorg in single combat. General Tullius, however, thinks that this is murder, and he takes on Ulfric Stormcloak in a giant-ass war, and a couple of months into the war, they ambush him at Darkwater Crossing, and they manage to successfully get him to Helgen, where he faces execution. And right there and then is where the game Elder Scrolls V Skyrim begins, and where I have to go into a deep detail about everything that I think of the situation at hand. So, yeah, effectively that's the entire plot of the story. The Thalmor were basically salty because a mortal man ascended to godhood who threatened their entire race. They planned for hundreds, if not maybe over 1,000 years, to make his worship illegal, and the entirety of the Nordic people basically suffered because of it. And throughout the entirety of this time, nobody really wanted to stop the worship of Talos except for the Thalmor, and they got what they wanted in the end, so now the weakened empire has to accede to their demands, or else they threaten to go to war with them. So looking at it through the scope of, oh, hey, the entirety of the empire is basically telling us to not worship our god anymore because a different empire basically told them to make it illegal. A lot of people would reasonably be pissed, and the empire doesn't do anything to stop the Thalmor from going around murdering hundreds, if not thousands, of people who are secretly worshiping Talos. So I kind of get it. I'm not gonna lie. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, comment with your thoughts and opinions and all that stuff, and I will see you later.